Every single day, millions of people over 60 sit down to a meal they think is safe, maybe even healthy. But hidden inside some of the most common meats on the planet are compounds that researchers are now linking directly to heart disease, cancer, cognitive decline, and early death in older adults. And the scariest part? Your doctor probably never told you any of this. A 2020 study in JAMA Internal Medicine followed over 500,000 Americans for 16 years and found that what you eat after 60 hits your body completely differently than it did at 40. Your liver, kidneys, and gut all process meat with far less efficiency as you age. So before you open that fridge tonight, you need to hear this, especially number 1, because what researchers found about this specific meat and its link to dementia has changed how cardiologists now counsel every patient over 60. Number 4, farmed salmon. Let's start with a shocker, because most people think salmon is one of the healthiest things they can eat. And wild salmon? Absolutely. But farmed salmon is a completely different story, and if you're over 60, the difference matters more than you think. Farmed salmon is raised in crowded ocean pens and fed a processed diet of fish meal, soy protein, and synthetic astaxanthin. That's the chemical added to make the fish flesh look pink instead of the gray it naturally turns in captivity. A 2004 study published in the journal Science, which analyzed farmed salmon from around the world, found that farmed Atlantic salmon contained 10 times more persistent organic pollutants, called POPs, than wild salmon. These pollutants include PCBs, dioxins, and organochlorine pesticides. The researchers measured contamination levels so high that they recommended people eat farmed salmon no more than once a month to stay within safe exposure limits set by the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, why does this hit seniors harder? Because POPs accumulate in fat tissue over a lifetime, and by the time you're in your 60s or 70s, your body's detoxification systems, primarily your liver and kidneys, are already working at reduced capacity. A 2018 report from the National Institute on Aging confirmed that liver detoxification efficiency drops by roughly 30 to 40% between the ages of 40 and 70. So the same level of chemical exposure that a 35-year-old can process and clear becomes a much bigger burden for a 65-year-old. These toxins then sit in fatty tissue longer, disrupt hormone signaling, and contribute to chronic low-grade inflammation, which is one of the primary drivers of cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline in older adults. On top of the chemical issue, farmed salmon is also far higher in omega-6 fatty acids and much lower in the omega-3s that made salmon famous as a health food. A 2005 analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in farmed salmon was significantly worse than in wild-caught, making it far less effective at reducing inflammation. For someone over 60 who is eating salmon specifically to protect their heart and brain, farmed salmon may actually be doing the opposite. So what do? The fix here is simple but important. Always choose wild-caught Alaskan salmon, sockeye, or coho. These are not raised in pens, and they feed on natural marine organisms, which means their omega-3 content is high and their toxic load is low. When you're at the grocery store, the label matters. Look for wild-caught Pacific salmon. If it just says Atlantic salmon, it is almost certainly farmed. Canned wild-caught salmon is also a great budget-friendly option, and studies show its nutritional profile is nearly identical to fresh. Aim for 2 to 3 servings per week and always pair it with vegetables rich in antioxidants like broccoli or leafy greens, which support your liver's ability to process any residual toxins. Now farmed fish is concerning enough. But what's coming next is something most people eat multiple times a week without a second thought. If this is opening your eyes, hit subscribe. We break down what's actually harming your health every week. Number 3. Processed deli meats, ham, turkey breast, bologna, salami, roast beef from the deli counter. These are lunchtime staples for millions of seniors. They're convenient, they seem lean, and they feel like a reasonable protein choice. But researchers have been sounding the alarm on processed deli meats for over a decade, and the data is alarming. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IRC, officially classified processed meats as a Group 1 carcinogen. That puts them in the same category as tobacco smoking and asbestos in terms of the strength of scientific evidence linking them to cancer. The IRC's review analyzed over 800 studies and concluded that eating 50 grams of processed meat daily, that's roughly 2 thin slices of deli ham, increases your risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. For seniors, whose colorectal cancer risk is already elevated with age, this is not a small number. But cancer isn't even the most immediate danger for people over 60. The bigger problem is sodium. Most processed deli meats contain between 400 and 1,200 milligrams of sodium per serving, and many people eat 2 or 3 servings at once. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day for older adults, and a deli sandwich can blow past that in a single meal. A 2017 study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that high dietary sodium intake in adults over 60 was independently associated with a 23% increased risk of cardiovascular events, including heart attacks and strokes, compared to those with lower sodium intake. The chemicals used to preserve deli meats, primarily sodium nitrate and sodium nitrite, are another major problem. These compounds are added to prevent bacterial growth and maintain the pink color of the meat. But when nitrites mix with the amino acids in protein during digestion, they form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are potent carcinogens, and a 2021 study in the European Journal of Epidemiology found that nitrosamine exposure was significantly associated with increased risk of stomach, esophageal, and pancreatic cancers, cancers that disproportionately affect older adults. The way you eat deli meats also matters. Most people eat them cold, straight from the package, sandwiched between bread with processed condiments. This creates a meal that is high in sodium, high in nitrates, high in refined carbohydrates, and low in the fiber and antioxidants that could help counteract some of the damage. If you are going to eat deli meats occasionally, choose products labeled nitrate-free or uncured. Though be aware that uncured meats often use celery powder, which contains naturally occurring nitrates, so the reduction in exposure is real but not complete. Better yet, roast your own chicken or turkey breast on Sunday and slice it throughout the week. You get the same convenience with none of the preservatives. Keep portion sizes to 2 ounces or less, and always pair with high-fiber vegetables to slow absorption and reduce the impact on your cardiovascular system. Deli meats are bad, but the next one on our list is probably sitting in your freezer right now, and most people have no idea what it's doing to their arteries. Number 2, grain-fed conventional red meat. Red meat has been the center of nutrition debates for decades, and the truth is nuanced. But for people over 60, the science is now pointing in a very clear direction. Conventional grain-fed red meat, eaten regularly, accelerates several of the biological processes that already speed up with age. Here's the core issue. When cattle are fed a grain-based diet, primarily corn and soy, instead of their natural grass diet, the fat composition of the meat changes dramatically. Grain-fed beef is significantly higher in saturated fat and has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of roughly 10:1 or higher. Grass-fed beef, by comparison, has a ratio closer to 2:1. A 2010 review published in the Nutrition Journal confirmed these differences and noted that the fatty acid profile of grass-fed beef more closely resembles wild game and is associated with lower inflammatory markers. But the saturated fat issue alone doesn't explain the full picture. One of the most significant recent discoveries involves a compound called TMAO, trimethylamine N oxide. When you eat red meat, gut bacteria break down a nutrient called L-carnitine, which is found in high concentrations in beef, and produce a compound that the liver then converts into TMAO. A landmark 2013 study published in Nature Medicine by researchers at the Cleveland Clinic found that TMAO promotes the buildup of cholesterol in artery walls, contributing directly to atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of arteries. Most shockingly, the study showed that people who eat red meat regularly have gut bacteria that produce far more TMAO than those who don't, meaning the more you eat it, the more efficiently your gut becomes at generating this artery-damaging compound. For seniors, this matters even more because of something called inflammaging, a term used by geroscientists to describe the chronic low-grade inflammation that increases with age and drives nearly every age-related disease. A 2019 study published in Nutrients analyzed inflammatory markers in adults over 60 and found that higher intake of unprocessed red meat was associated with elevated levels of C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, two of the most reliable indicators of systemic inflammation. The study found that eating red meat more than 5 times per week was associated with a 28% higher inflammatory marker load compared to those who ate it twice a week or less. Here's the important thing. This doesn't mean you need to stop eating red meat entirely. The research consistently shows that the dose makes the poison. A 2020 meta-analysis in the Annals of Internal Medicine found that reducing red meat consumption by 3 servings per week was associated with a small but meaningful reduction in cardiovascular risk. For seniors, the recommendation from most cardiologists and geriatric nutritionists is to limit conventional red meat to no more than 2 servings per week and, when you do eat it, to choose grass-fed and grass-finished beef whenever possible. The preparation method also matters enormously. High-heat cooking, grilling, charbroiling, pan-frying at very high temperatures creates compounds called heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, both of which are carcinogenic. A 1998 study from the National Cancer Institute found that people who ate well-done, grilled or barbecued red meat had more than 3 times the risk of stomach cancer compared to those who ate their meat rare or medium. Slow cooking, braising, stewing, using a slow cooker at low temperatures, dramatically reduces the formation of these harmful compounds and produces a more tender, digestible result, which matters more as digestive enzyme production declines with age. If you thought that was eye-opening, nothing prepares you for what's at the top of this list. This is the meat that researchers are now calling one of the most underestimated threats to brain health in seniors, and almost nobody is talking about it. Number 1. Processed pork products. This is the one. Bacon, breakfast sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, chorizo. These processed pork products are eaten by millions of seniors every single week, often daily, and the science connecting them specifically to cognitive decline, dementia, cardiovascular mortality, and cancer in adults over 60 is both shocking and deeply underreported. Let's start with what the data actually says. A comprehensive 2021 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by researchers at the University of Leeds analyzed the health records of nearly 500,000 participants and found that consuming processed meat, with processed pork as the dominant source, was associated with a 44% increased risk of developing dementia overall, and a 19% increased risk of Alzheimer's disease specifically. The study controlled for age, sex, smoking, physical activity, and socioeconomic status. The association held even at low consumption levels, just 25 grams per day, which is roughly 1 strip of bacon. This is one of the largest studies ever conducted on diet and dementia, and its findings are profound. Why does processed pork target the brain so aggressively? The answer involves several overlapping mechanisms. First, the extremely high sodium and saturated fat content of processed pork products contributes to hypertension and cerebrovascular disease, that is, damage to the blood vessels that supply the brain. High blood pressure is the single most significant modifiable risk factor for dementia, and a 2016 study published in Lancet Neurology found that uncontrolled hypertension in midlife and later life was responsible for approximately 8% of all dementia cases globally. Processed pork is one of the highest dietary sources of sodium in the American diet. A single serving of bacon, about 3 slices, contains roughly 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium. A hot dog clocks in at 400 to 700 milligrams. Eat these foods daily, and you are almost certainly exceeding your safe sodium threshold and directly stressing your cardiovascular and cerebrovascular systems. Second, processed pork is loaded with advanced glycation end products, called AGEs. These are compounds formed when proteins or fats combine with sugars under high heat, which is exactly what happens when you fry bacon or grill sausage. AGEs promote oxidative stress and inflammation throughout the body, and research has shown that they accumulate in brain tissue over time, contributing to the protein aggregation, the clumping of tau and amyloid proteins, that characterizes Alzheimer's disease. A 2014 study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that dietary AGEs directly promoted tau phosphorylation, a core mechanism in the development of Alzheimer's, in animal models, and that reducing AGE intake measurably slowed cognitive decline. Third, there's the nitrate issue again, but amplified. Processed pork products are among the highest dietary sources of nitrosamines of any food category. A 2009 study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease by researchers at Brown University found the striking correlation between rising nitrosamine exposure from processed meats and the increasing rates of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and type 2 diabetes, all diseases involving insulin resistance in the brain. The lead researcher, Dr. Suzanne de la Monte, described the pattern as consistent with a dietary toxin causing what she called type 3 diabetes in the brain, a state of neuronal insulin resistance that accelerates cognitive deterioration. For people over 60, the compounding effect of all 3 mechanisms, vascular damage, AGE accumulation, and nitrosamine-driven neurodegeneration, happening simultaneously is what makes processed pork uniquely dangerous at this stage of life. A younger person's brain has more resilience, more vascular reserve, more antioxidant capacity. By 60, much of that reserve has been depleted. What your brain can tolerate at 35, it simply cannot absorb at 65. Now, the practical steps. The most important thing is to treat processed pork as an extremely occasional food, not a weekly staple. If you currently eat bacon or sausage several times a week, cutting back to once or twice a month is one of the most impactful dietary changes you can make for your long-term brain health. When you do eat it, lower nitrate versions do exist. Look for uncured products made with sea salt only and cook them at lower temperatures to reduce AGE formation. Baking bacon in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit instead of pan frying at high heat significantly reduces both AGE production and the formation of carcinogenic compounds. Better protein alternatives for breakfast include eggs, particularly poached or soft-boiled, which avoids high heat cooking damage, along with smoked wild-caught fish, plain Greek yogurt, or legumes. These options provide sustained protein and support rather than damage cardiovascular and neurological function. If you love the flavor that sausage brings to a dish, try turkey or chicken sausage with no nitrates added and minimal sodium. It's not identical, but it's close enough to satisfy the craving without the associated risks. The bottom line is this: what you eat after 60 is not the same equation it was decades ago. Your body has changed, your risk factors have shifted, and the foods that seemed harmless, or even enjoyable, for most of your life can have outsized consequences at this stage. The good news is that dietary changes, even late in life, produce measurable results. A 2019 study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that adopting a Mediterranean-style diet, lower in processed meats, higher in fish, vegetables, olive oil, and legumes. Reduce the risk of major cardiovascular events by 30% even in adults over 65. It is never too late to change what's on your plate, and it may be the single most powerful thing you can do for the decades you still have ahead. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these 4 meats surprised you the most? Share with us your experiences and opinions in the comments below. We love to hear them. Thanks for watching.